who joins me now on the West Her hotline. Jon has been on our show many times over the years. Veteran analyst whose work in recent seasons has been centered on the Bucs, who the Bills face on Saturday night. Jon, how have you been?
Hey, I've been doing really well. Excited that real football is right around the corner. I know you guys are as well. Huge season for Buffalo. So, as always, a pleasure to be on here talking Bills with you.
Thank you, Jon. And we can do this twice this year because, in a rare thing, the Bills will play the Buccaneers in the preseason and the regular season. Do you know anything about how, and I really don't, so I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't, but how these schedules get made and how it is that these teams are playing each other in a season where they will meet again?
The preseason part of it is really kind of convenience relationships. I think they kind of work that out sort of that way, really like, oh, yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. We have good relationships. It's kind of convenient for us, the convenient trip, expenses. I think all of that sort of is how it gets worked out. How that works with the Bills and the Bucs this year, I'm not positive. I haven't thought about it.
Right. It's not like you're right around the corner here, but, I'm looking forward to Saturday. Who are we going to see from Tampa's side that we know of? Is this a game for the Bucs where everybody sits?
Well, everybody's sitting because of injury in Tampa Bay. So.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm kidding. This is not a game. It sounds like none of the starters are going to play for the Bucs, which will mean they went through the preseason without some guys, Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, getting any snaps at all in the preseason, which is just as well. I think more and more teams are moving that direction in a lot of ways. So you won't see any of the regular starters, I would say, play for Tampa Bay in this game. Now, there's still a couple jobs that are sort of like up in the air maybe a little bit, where you kind of expect, you'll know who will start. Will, Servicia Dennis be the starter next to Levante David at linebacker? Will Jacob Parrish be the nickel corner starting? Will he be held out of this game, or will that still be part of the quote-unquote competition, even though everyone kind of expects him to win the starting job there? So offensively, I think those roles are mostly set in stone, but with Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan set to miss the beginning of the year, will Igbuka play at all, or will he be considered a starter and not play at all in that game? Then I think probably is the case, and so it'll be pretty limited in terms of there's not many jobs even up for competition on the Bucs starting lineup, so it'll be pretty limited in terms of the starters you see.
Do you have a particular philosophy about that? For me, I guess maybe this will sound like a cop-out. Maybe it is one where I don't need them to play. I kind of like the idea of it for just simple reasons, but don't get hurt. And I know you can't play like that. I mean, an injury to an important player would just bring up all the questions, and that's why the league does it the way it does. But man, I mean, the preseason is just sort of annoying enough when you're getting ready for the real thing, and especially now when so many stars just never see the field.
Yeah, I think more and more teams have been gravitating toward these padded practices or these joint padded practices against other teams where they can control the physicality and the emotion and the momentum, all those things a little bit more than maybe they can in a game setting. Like, for example, you can't be certain of anything, but you can basically make it in these settings that your quarterback doesn't get hurt in these joint practices setting, your quarterback doesn't get hit, no contact, things like that. Obviously in the game you can't. So I think teams are gravitating more and more toward now. Almost, I think maybe every team in the league does it, where they joint practice at least against one team, maybe against multiple teams, and they feel like that replaces the game. So if your players play one up, everything looks crisp enough in those joint practices, where it's probably 85% full speed, something like that. But your quarterback's not at risk of an injury. You're probably not going to get a guy leveled like you will on game day. The players are a little bit more cautious about that stuff. Whereas in the game, you get the emotions going up with the game, the preamble, all that stuff built up to the game, and you got, it's kind of no holds barred out there in terms of the things that will happen. And so I think teams just feel like whether it's smart or not, whether it's accurate or not, they can control the risk of injury a little bit more, but still get the same benefit of going full speed. So I think you're going to see a lot more starters playing in those joint practices, and that'll become more and more of a big deal and less in preseason.
Yeah. Then I guess maybe we should be able to buy tickets to those. And not have to, as season ticket holders, have to buy the preseason games.
We really should be. I mean, that is like the joy practices. You've probably, I'm sure, been to some. I've been to some. Like, it is. I mean, it is. The tempers that flare in between is really fun.
Yes. And the Bills went to Chicago last week for this, and the Bears did have fans in attendance. With Jon Ledyard at Ledyard NFL Draft. I know a lot of your work over the years and our conversations have been about the NFL Draft and rookies coming into the league. Tampa made what I'd call one of the more intriguing picks of the first round this year with Emeka Egbuka. You mentioned him, and he seems to have, with the injuries coupled with this, elevated, impressed enough where maybe he wouldn't play in this game anyway. I don't know. But
yeah.
What did you think of the pick when they made it, and how good does he look?
He looks outstanding, looks absolutely phenomenal, and that was what I expected. He was, other than Travis Hunter, Egbuka was my number one wide receiver in the class, and I think he was my 9th overall player maybe. Wow. And the reason's kind of simple. I mean, he is just a really well-rounded player who I think early on in the process, people were like, well, he's just not that great at any one thing. Well, he could have gone to the NFL and been a first-round pick the year before. He chose to go back because he wanted to go back, and he thought Ohio State had that much of a chance of making noise, and he wanted to be a part of that type of history at the school. And so that was his objective. I think that was kept really quiet at the time because there were other really exciting, intriguing pieces that people kind of became enamored with. But even at Ohio State, obviously with Jeremiah Smith being there. But if you watched him, you just saw a guy who was really ready for the pro game. You know, a lot of people are kind of still scouting wide receivers, and you guys know this from watching Shakir break out last year. A lot of people are scouting wide receivers and saying, okay, where is the guy that can be my number one and can win outside the numbers, vertically down the field, moss people, do all this crazy stuff after the catch, all these kind of guys. And there are certainly a couple guys like that, but almost all those guys can move around, play different positions, can run the full route tree from any alignment. In a league that's playing so condensed from an offensive perspective, everybody's in reduced splits. They're bringing wide receivers to the line of scrimmage. Everybody's getting a two-way go. Some of that stuff is less important than guys who just know how to play, period, but rather than have these unbelievable traits. We've seen that with Puka Nacua. We've seen that with Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've seen all these kind of guys, Shakir last year, who can play in the reduced split role with the two-way goes and use all their football IQ and their technique to their advantage. It doesn't hurt that Egbuka is also really big and strong and also really athletic, but people didn't give him credit for any of those things early on in the process. And then as the process went on, it was like, oh, wait, he ran a 4.4 at his pro day? Like, oh, wait, he's actually pretty fast. If you watch him on tape, he's running by everybody for Oregon. That's a pretty good organization. Like, okay, like, and you're watching and you're like, okay, I actually don't think this guy really has that many limitations. And everybody already knew he caught everything. He could run every route and could block. And so he just fits the modern game really, really well. And I think people maybe just were looking at traits of wide receivers and say, well, this guy's bigger, faster. But if you watch the modern game and you see what really matters right now in the NFL at this position, he really had pretty much all those traits and characteristics. So it's not a surprise to me he's hit the ground running. And obviously, from a value perspective, with Chris Godwin missing probably the first month of the season, he's going to give them a lot right away.
Love to see it. Jon Ledyard, my guest. I'm Mike Schopp. Bulldog is off today. This is WGR. I want to use the word quietly here, but you're being more embedded with the Bucs. It may not seem like it's the right word, but I would say the Bucs have won the NFC South 4 years in a row pretty quietly. The last time they didn't was a Super Bowl winning team when New Orleans won the NFC South and the Bucs won the Super Bowl anyway. So that's a pretty good run. I mean, the Bills are on 5, but they've kind of dominated this division most of those years, and the Bucs couldn't quite get away with calling it that. So pretty good run. I mean, Bowles and Mayfield, the story he's been. Do you think maybe the Bucs don't get enough credit?
I mean, they didn't get enough credit when they won the Super Bowl. People moved on like the next day, I think, just because it was like, oh, Tom Brady again, and the Buccaneers are a small market. And so, yeah, from that perspective, they probably don't get enough credit. And I'm somebody who grew up, and live now that I've moved out of the Tampa Bay area, still like in the Pittsburgh area. So the Steelers, it's, you turn on ESPN and they talk every day. Well, the Steelers haven't won a playoff game in forever. And they're like every offseason, it's like, is this the year? Is this Mike Tomlin and the Steelers? It's like, well, they didn't do anything. So a lot of that stuff is just really kind of ratings based. A lot of the conversation. If you watch what the Bucs have done, the thing that's been really impressive is just the era navigation, right? To go from an era with Tom Brady and an older team that was won a Super Bowl and probably, if they don't suffer all those injuries, had a real good chance the next year. Lost to the Rams late in that game, but had a real good chance to do it again the next year. And I think then had to navigate out of that era after the Brady down year where they still won the division into another one with other young players that I think that was just really difficult to do. Most teams, even the Eagles, who are like the preeminent organization in the league, went through some dry spell down years when they transitioned eras from the Wentz era to Wentz Foles to Jalen Hurts. And so I think the fact that the Bucs have been able to do that, yes, the division's been weaker, but the Bucs really haven't been that much stronger. They've just been better coach, better run organization, better drafting organization. So to me, that's one of the things that's been really impressive about them is, that kind of leadership starts at the very top of the organization, and where Jason Licht has become one of the best GMs in the NFL, his ability to continue to rebuild the roster, retool the roster with good young players, even as undrafted free agents, that's something that, this is certainly with Ian Bean, two of the best GMs in the league, and you've seen them kind of fortify the roster and navigate eras. The Bills haven't done that at quarterback maybe necessarily yet, but you've certainly seen it with their defense, especially last year. Was a big era of coming out of those safeties and Milano being hurt and Edmonds and all these changes, and then they had to navigate the era and replace everything while remaining competitive. It's just very difficult to do. Not many teams can do it.
I share your perspective when it comes to the Steelers, for example, by comparison with the Bucs, and just certain teams get the attention. And the Steelers have not won a playoff game since the 2016 season, which they did, by the way, without scoring a touchdown in Kansas City, that divisional round game. So, John, the Mayfield story, what is your sort of perspective on him? Like, is he somebody that you were really surprised to see flourish with Tampa? Always interesting, of course, here to think about that 18 draft, Mayfield at the top. Allen and Lamar Jackson have been stars almost the whole time. Then you have Mayfield and Darnold, who just kind of reemerged unexpectedly, I would say. Maybe that puts it mildly, especially in Darnold's case.
Yeah, with Mayfield, you just get a lot of variance. Like, you get the extreme good and the extreme bad. And so it's about how often he can really find the balance. You're guaranteed to get both of those, I think. How often can he find the balance and limit kind of the low-end stuff is going to be the question with him. He's just physically kind of capable of doing everything. When he got to the Bucs, it was kind of like, okay, well, can he play composed in the pocket? Well, he's done that. He doesn't always do it, but he's done it a ton to the point where, like, he's even able to have really good seasons. Well, can he throw to the middle of the field? Is he going to do that consistently? A lot of shorter quarterbacks have struggled with that. No, he showed the last couple of years he's been able to do that very willingly, throw to the middle of the field. He's got a cannon for an arm. He can throw the ball down the field. So he really, he's made tons of plays out of structure. He's been unbelievable out of structure in Tampa Bay. But he isn't such a freak that he's going to live in that way either and always be successful. So he's one of the most interesting quarterbacks in the league, because you really have two groups of quarterbacks that most people talk about in the league. The guys who are clearly the guys that will have you in every year, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, the Burrows, the Mahomes, those guys that will have it in it every year. You're guaranteed, because those guys are so good to have it in it. And then you have the guys that are probably solid every year, but you wonder if they're ever going to be good enough to actually win it all. There's a good number of those kind of guys. Mayfield in the same game can represent both parties, and that's what makes him such an interesting player, I think, is he throws the ball, all the touchdown pass last year, all the scoring, all the efficiency. Oh, but he also led the league turnover-worthy plays, and he got sacked way more times than anybody should behind what might have been the best pass protection group in the league. So he just can kind of devolve at times, and that is it's like a poor man's Matt Stafford, if you remember, especially before Stafford got to like the perfect nucleus that was the Rams organization, where it was like, man, sometimes Matt Stafford was the only reason the Lions were even competitive. And other times, like, he would throw him out of a game because he was just too ballsy, too aggressive. That's sort of what you get with Baker Mayfield. But in terms of leadership and the team following him, every single dude on the team would take a bullet for him. Like, they all absolutely love him. And that's where he and Josh Allen, I think, have really found common ground, where Allen sort of always had that maturity beyond his years. Baker had to grow into that, but he's found that now. And I think you are definitely looking at two of the guys that are most beloved in terms of the leadership of their team, and he has really become the face of the franchise. It's pretty crazy.
I can buy that. It is quite a stat line last year. 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, 16 picks, 40 sacks, like you alluded to. Those tiers or those different categories for quarterbacks, to put it another way, that you talked about, there's a big difference in being in the NFC. Like when you think about the hierarchy in the AFC, guys who are not on that top tier, let's just see if they can ever get it done, right? I mean, maybe that's Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert, a couple of obvious examples. In the NFC, I mean, the Eagles were so good, but there seems to be much more of a window. I'm not saying anything controversial by that. Yeah. So maybe, it happened with Stafford. It happened with Hurts. Maybe it's Mayfield. Maybe it's Prescott, Jordan Love. Who knows?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the weird thing about the conferences right now is the NFC has much better teams. Even if you look at the top of the teams in the AFC, I think you'd find some things to get concerned about with Buffalo, with Baltimore, and with Kansas City right now in terms of the roster. Mm-hmm. You look at the NFC, you look at some of these rosters, like the rosters are unbelievable, but like all the best quarterbacks are in the AFC. So it's sort of like it feels like the NFC is kind of wide open, but there's also way more competition. I mean, are the Bears like the third worst team in the conference right now? And would it really be surprising if Ben Johnson sneaks them into the playoffs? Like, it's just so competitive. And then you look in the AFC and you're like, well, you could probably take 6-7 teams out of it right now, maybe even before it even gets started. So, I think there's just a huge difference, disparity in the conference in that way. And obviously, you're in terms of what you'd expect to see in the Super Bowl, everybody's expecting to see one of Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City. And outside of Philly, I think people would put a bunch of teams in the NFC possibly in there and not be surprised. So it's really been a funny distinction between the two conferences right now, in which the NFC seems to just have so much parity, but because there isn't a lot of elite, high-end, consistent quarterback play, there's kind of anybody's guess how things are going to shake out. You get a magic run like Washington had, despite all their roster flaws, just because their quarterback looked like he might be one of them ones. Whereas in the AFC, which 3 or 4 are going to be standing at the end of every year. If Burrow's team can give him enough help, he'll be in there too. And it's been that way for a little while now, it feels like.
John, just a couple minutes here before we let you go. I know you've had a keen interest in the Steelers, if I know you well enough, like for most of your life, right? I mean, that was your team coming up. Everybody, sure, they get their share of attention, as you said, but everybody does kind of want to know how that's going to go with Aaron Rodgers. Talking about Mayfield and the variance, I mean, maybe Rodgers doesn't have the upside that he used to. That seems probably right. But, man, he doesn't throw picks. So, I don't know. Like, can you see it going well?
I think I could see them be the 7th seed again type of outcome. Like, I think that's possible for sure. The defense should be really, really good. And last year it should have been way better than it was. And frankly, I don't think it was that well coached of a unit. And so I think this year they've certainly fortified the biggest weakness at corner. They've given themselves an actual nickel, a guy who can play in the nickel with force, which is something every defense really needs. You guys know that, watching Teron Johnson play, how important that role is for a team. And I think that the Steelers feel like now with Jalen Ramsey, even though he's older, like I think he's still able to do a lot of those things that they need and were missing in that defense. So they have definitely improved the talent level of the secondary, which was the weakest group. Even if Minka isn't there anymore, the way they used him was just so far from impact type of role that I actually don't think, even though he could have been used in a better way, the actual way they were going to use him, it's actually probably not that difficult to replace and still get above the bar play. Whereas what they were missing and what they found in him and Jalen Ramsey, I think, was a lot harder to find. So I do think the defense can be really, really good. Offensively, I really don't see it. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball very well. Rodgers can still make some throws, but just the lack of mobility and the fact that he doesn't want to get hit so bad, I think it's just all that combination of those things to me are concerning enough that I really doubt this team is going to have any sort of a high ceiling in a league that you have to score points, and I think they're going to really struggle to run the ball a lot on this young offensive line, right? I mean, the 4 of these 5 guys who are going to be starting for them are recent draft picks, and the right tackle's Troy Fautanu, who's barely played in the league because of an injury last year. So there's just a lot of unknown. I think there's a lot of talent there. That group, how well and how fast they come together is going to be really telling for how their season goes. But even if it's a good group, I just think groups that young in the offensive line typically take a while to gel and mesh and be at their peak performance. And when you couple that with a quarterback who really can't move at all, and Aaron Rodgers, like, I do think it's going to be enough negative moments where the offense is going to be very limited and very siloed in terms of what they can do.
Last thing, John, let's wrap on a Bills question, and I might want to focus on their recent drafts for as much effort as you put into studying the draft. The Bills have gotten away with what their misses, because of Allen, and they've really, of course, as you know, dominated here in this division for years. Just playoff losses are the thing. But the last couple of drafts have people questioning them a little bit, whether it's Elam, who's already gone, Kincaid, Coleman, Cole Bishop seems a little iffy, although it's probably too early to say more than that. Yeah. And then Hairston this year is injured already, so we can't really say much about him. But I'd like to know what you thought of him as a prospect.
Yeah, Harrison is really interested in me because of the scheme in college, I think, was so unique. He played basically like an off-man type of scheme at Kentucky, which just isn't really in there in the NFL. Like, they obviously play some zone. You would see him sometimes in cover three, basic stuff, spot dropping type stuff at Kentucky, but a lot of his normal, like, early down stuff was like basically he would take like 2 steps and then he's just kind of reading and reacting the receiver across from him. And so it was kind of like an off-man read and react type of scheme, and not a lot of NFL teams run scheme like that. So you wondered just what was the learning curve going to be, and you had kind of assumed it was going to be a little bit challenging just because I'm sure communications and teaching points and all that stuff are different. And then he got hurt, so it's really been hard to tell how fast his transition is going to go to the NFL. The athletic traits are there and ball skills are there, but I think there's going to be a lot of technical, mental lapses that he needs to make up for with splash plays basically early on. So I think there's a path for him to being a pretty high variance guy, like where there's the lows are low, the highs are highs early on in his career in the NFL. He's a really different player than the other guys they have, which kind of made it, I just didn't see that one coming type of thing from a fit perspective. I know there was maybe some interest, but I do wonder how he's going to be able to mesh into what they do, or are they going to change some of what they do to fit his skill set? But this has been, traditionally a team that certainly can match up a little bit more in man last year, I think, even with Christian Benford playing as well as he did, but traditionally a pretty zone-heavy defense. And so there's just a lot of mental stuff. And in college, sometimes when it was pure zone, he did struggle a little bit more with that rather than the normal staple of their scheme, which was I'm looking at one guy and reacting to what he does. Now you have to see more of the picture at once. That can be a real challenge for a guy making the transition. So he'll be fascinating to watch, I think, this season if he does get back healthy with the time that's missed. How does he work his way back into a group that I think is pretty weak outside of Christian Benford?
Yeah, I was going to say what you said there at the end. It seems like for his sake and for the team's that this is important time missed by his injury. And my guess is we don't see him by week 1, but I don't really know. Hopefully I'm wrong. Jon, thanks for your time. It's been too long. Appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks for having me. I always appreciate it.
You're welcome. Jon Ledyard at Ledyard NFL Draft